Hey, Dan, I see they have the scratch coat on.
Yes.
How close, when are they going to start putting on the finish?
Well, it's about a four coat process. So it,
Brown finish, yeah.
well, it's actually scratched and brown, then there's a mesh coat, and then the top color coat.
Oh, you're doing a color
Yep.
rather than paint.
Yep.
Who's the guy that's doing it? Looks like they're doing a pretty decent job.
Yeah, no, he's terrific. He's done a lot of stucco work for me. Rodney Furlani.
Local?
Yep. Yep. Kind of old school stucco cement.
No gunite for him?
No.
We got 2 minutes. We don't find many that do it the hard way anymore or do the stucco at all.
It's a process.
Yeah. And you got to be patient.
Yeah.
They're doing anything fancy for the top coat? Cat's eyes, heavy texture?
Nope.
Nope. Smooth finish, huh?
Smooth finish.
That's kind of unusual. It'll look more, how can I say this? North African than anything else, I would think.
That could work for me.
David and Jenny, can we have you guys just do a quick audio, and Tom, just a quick audio check so we can make sure your audio is working?
Yeah, hi, this is Jenny. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tom, can you hear us?
It's David Walker. Can you hear me?
We can.
Ah, fantastic.
Okay, this is Tom. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I do.
Perfect.
I'm hiding here.
Okay. And Lily, can you hear us?
I can, yeah. Hi, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Lily.
Hi.
It's 6 o'clock, Lester.
Thank you, Ms. Gamero. I would like to call the regular scheduled meeting of the City of St. Helena's Planning Commission for Tuesday, July 21st to order. I'd like to begin by reading some information about public access during the COVID restrictions. In accordance with Executive Orders N2520, N2920, and guidance from the California Department of Public Health on gatherings, remote public participation is allowed. We will address the order in the following ways. Members of the public may not physically attend meetings. The Planning Commission meeting will be live streamed on Comcast Channel 28 and on the city's website, barring technical difficulties. Those members of the public wishing to participate must do so remotely via Zoom electronic meetings in the following ways. By either logging on to the Zoom link located on the meeting agenda, please download the app to your computer or mobile device, and enter the meeting ID, or by calling a listed number and entering the meeting ID. Public comment for Planning Commission meetings will be accepted via email to publiccomment@cityofsthelena.org. Please see the end of the agenda for more detailed public participation instructions. And now it's time for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I did not prepare in advance with a flag. However, if everyone else mutes their microphone, I will lead us all in the pledge. Oh, no, I have a flag. Excuse me, I almost forgot. Okay, got that covered. So, I will begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that brings us to the roll call. Ms. Gamero.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Commissioner Hale,
Here.
Commissioner Monette,
Here.
Vice Chair Pont,
Here.
and Chair Hardy.
Here. So that brings us to the public forum section of tonight's agenda. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on subjects that are not on tonight's agenda. And then because they're not on the agenda, the Brown Act constrains our responses. We cannot make substantive responses to the comment, but members of the public who have something to say on an item not on our agenda are welcome to do so. The time is now, and I believe I turn to you, Ms. Kolziski, to ask, are there members of the public waiting to speak?
I do want to make just one comment. I want to let everyone know that if that you would like to call into the meeting, if you have any trouble with the Zoom app, you can call 669-900-6833. And the meeting ID for this meeting is 897-7206-2048. Once you are in the meeting, you can press *9 and that will raise your hand virtually, or you can press the raise hand button in the app. So let me check here to see if we have any public comment at this time. At this time, we do not have any public comment.
Thank you. Then we'll go on to the next part of our agenda, which is for the consent items. Except now I'm lost on the agenda. Okay. There we are. We have one consent item, item 4.1, approval of minutes. And regarding consent items, any member of the public or any member of the commission may ask that the item be removed from consent for discussion. Otherwise, it can be approved by roll call without further discussion. Ms. Kolziski, is there anyone from the public who might be raising their hand because they wish to pull this from the agenda, from the consent agenda?
This time I do not. Oh, actually, yes, I do see someone. Shall I allow them to speak?
Please do.
Ms. Smith, go ahead.
I have a feeling this is about the public hearing item.
Ms. Smith, you can go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on, I've got you in two places, so I have an echo. I wanted to comment on the proposal for the building on Adams Street. Is this the time that I would speak to that?
No, we're not quite there. There's some,
okay.
This is just a query as to whether anyone wants to pull the minutes from the consent calendar. Is there anyone on the commission who would like to pull the minutes from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I would happily entertain a motion.
Move the consent calendar.
And was that a second from Commissioner Hale? You're still muted, Commissioner Hale.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Gamero, would you call the roll, please?
Vice Chair Pont?
Yeah.
Commissioner Hale?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
And Chair Hardy?
Yes. Thank you. That brings us to the public hearing section of the agenda and item 5.1, which is a request by Jenny Hoover on behalf of David and Elyse Walker for adoption of a resolution granting demolition permit, design review, use permit, and variance approval to demolish an existing structure in order to construct a new 2,847 square foot commercial building on an existing non-conforming parcel located at 1229-1231 Adams Street, assessor's parcel number 009-240-023 in the Central Business District. I believe, Mr. Heacock, this project is yours to present, please.
Thank you, Chair Hardy. Okay, there go the plans. Wasn't expecting that. So the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing 2,520 square foot wooden metal building on the 3,801 square foot site at the corner of Moneyway and Adams Street, as the building is beyond repair and crosses over existing property lines. The applicant proposes to construct a new 2,847 square foot, two-story commercial office and retail building at the space. The new building would resemble the existing building in that it would be of a similar size and shape, and the exterior surfaces would be a combination of concrete, steel siding, vertical wood, and steel windows. The roof would have a shallow slope and short eaves with a height to the top ridge of 23 feet 4 inches. Total square footage on the site would increase by approximately 327 square feet, which actually represents a reduction in the overall footprint on site. The project as proposed does meet setback, height, and floor area ratio requirements. The subject property is currently listed on the City of St. Helena's Historic Resources Master List. As such, the applicant was required to consult with a qualified architectural historian who did determine that removal and replacement of the building may be undertaken without negatively impacting the integrity of St. Helena's historic downtown district. As far as water is concerned, the applicant has provided a water neutrality analysis, which is included as an attachment to the staff report that requires them to provide off-site retrofits in order to achieve water neutrality. and a condition of approval has been added requiring these retrofits, and no certificate of occupancy will be issued until they have completed, as evidenced by building permits. As far as parking is concerned, the applicant's building is within the city's parking impact overlay district, and this area of the city is impacted by a lack of off-street parking because the buildings are of historic and unique character and were constructed in the early history of the city when automobiles were not as common. The parking requirement for a new structure is 1 parking space per 300 square feet of floor area. So as proposed, this would require 9 on-site parking spaces. So according to the applicant, requiring these spaces would reduce the amount of space available for building square footage, thereby making development on the site financially infeasible, meaning that essentially parking would take up a majority of the parcel, not leaving enough space to actually construct a viable building. The 3 existing spaces on site are not currently up to standard, and bringing them up to code would require changes that would also render the project infeasible. Therefore, the applicant has applied for a use permit in order to pay in lieu parking fees in the amount of $7,000 a space, as permitted by Municipal Code Section 17-104-030. And as 9 parking spaces would typically be required, the applicant would have to pay $63,000 into the city's parking impact fund. St. Helena Municipal Code Section 17-48090D requires that landscaping must cover a minimum of 5% of the total project site. This would equate to 190 square feet. However, the applicant has applied for a variance in order to eliminate this on-site landscaping requirement to represent other similar buildings in the area. At the time of packet distribution, staff had received 1 letter in support of the project. And since we published the agenda, we have received 5 letters related to the project, which have been provided to the Planning Commission and attached to the end of the agenda. 3 of these letters were in general support of the project, and 2 were seemingly in opposition to the project due to parking-related issues. For the reasons described in the staff report, staff is recommending the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the project exempt from the requirements of CEQA, pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15301, 15302, 15303, and 15332, and accept the required findings and approve a demolition permit, design review, use permit, and variance for the proposed project at 1229/1231 Adams in the Central Business District. I am happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. As we saw earlier, the applicant's team is here, and I know they are anxious to speak on behalf of their project.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission for staff? I thought I saw a hand. Where did I see a hand? Commissioner Punt. Please.
A couple. I'd just like to say to start off with, I like the idea of using space. I do have some questions. First off, I suppose, is ADA. I noticed that the design has an ADA access that uses property actually controlled by the neighbor. I see a letter from the neighbor that says, yes, that's fine. But on the other hand, it's not an easement. So the first question is, could the neighbor cancel that?
John just went mute on me.
Okay. I'm live. Can everybody else hear me? Okay, Bobby can't. Okay, so I'm asking about that west side access. It says ADA. It's labeled as ADA access, but the neighbor actually controls the property. But it's being done without an easement. I recognize the neighbors later says, "Gee, we recognize that we could cut that off, and they'd have to build another access." But that would mean the building is not accessible until the ADA access is available. So is there any movement towards an easement on that? And if not, what's plan B for the building?
So I don't know if there's any movement between the applicant and that property owner to record reciprocal access easement for that space. That said, that is something we could condition. If for some reason that access were to go away, the project, they would be required to provide code compliant ADA parking.
Second ADA question. I noticed the second story seems to be set up as some sort of conference room, something like that, but there's no ADA access to it. Is that a problem?
According to the chief building official, everything was A-OK as far as ADA is concerned, and he is a stickler for ADA.
Okay. Third question. What's the status of the unnamed access way that includes part of the building's property to the south? The one between Money Way and Oak Street. Is that easement? Is that, fee simple owned by somebody else? Is there a line buried underneath it that the access way?
The same way to...
No, that's to the west. This is to the south. At the south edge of the property, there's an access way between Money Way and Oak Street.
So you're talking about on the applicant's property?
Yes, it's on the applicant's property. It's on city property. It's on every property between there.
Yeah, that's all that goes through private property.
And there's no easement. There's nothing.
Nothing that I've seen.
Okay, because I noticed that the property owner says we're interested in keeping that open.
Right.
Because it provides access to the neighbors. But once again, without an easement, there's no guarantee of access. Anybody along that line could close it, or the neighbor could close it. And if it is closed, all of a sudden that provides more area to the existing property, potentially for parking. Third question. The applicant kindly brings up the point that the city's code at this point doesn't allow backing out onto a public street for commercial property. What's the status of Money Way? And let me finish this first. I have trouble believing that's a public street. A public alley? Yes, but it has driveways on either side instead of intersections with what everybody agrees are streets. It's substandard in width, not only according to this general plan, but the previous general plan. There's almost no curb, gutter, and sidewalk on it. It's posted for 15 miles an hour, which is the top speed under California code for an alley. It's further restricted by loading zones. So essentially, it's basically one lane. It also has stop signs at what everybody would agree, I think, would be a driveway for a city parking lot. I recognize MUCDID allows you to do that, but that's an extremely unusual situation in which to place stop signs. So that brings up the question of what is the status of Money Lane?
It is an alley defined by code. There is a section buried in, I think it's general site design and development standards. It's 17.1.12.050 that defines Money Way as an alley. And it also has their special, that's where the 4-foot setbacks referenced on the west side and the 24-foot setback on the east side.
So it could be backed out onto under existing code. All right.
Correct.
Okay. That brought up the question about the shown loading zone, because I didn't see you out of that loading zone without backing up onto Money Lane. So we could have parking there. You can have a loading zone that can back up into the alley. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Heacock? Yes, Commissioner Manette.
Listening to Commissioner Pont generated this question. Aaron, you said that the building inspector said that the access to the second story was totally in line with ADA, but if there's not an elevator, I would like to know how it is in line. Unless there's an elevator, how is it in line with ADA? I mean, I want it for information. I'm not necessarily challenging his decision, but I would like to understand how it is in compliance with the ADA regulations if there's no elevator.
I don't know the answer, Bobby, but I can tell you that if there was any issue, Phil would have flagged it.
Yeah, but 100%. I would like to know.
I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any way that we could get an answer before, or have that a caveat or something?
ADA has a large carve out, if you will, for second stories of small 2-story buildings. Okay. And you have to go into the regulations to know the exact contours of the carve out. But we've already processed at least a couple of second story applications to which it applied. I think were there 2 winery tasting rooms approved up above Vasconi's? That's my recollection. I know one of them was for Snowden Vineyards. I think there was another. The exemption is not categorical and across the board. It applies to some kinds of businesses and not to others.
Okay.
So, for example, it does not apply to a medical office, but it applies to offices more generally. So one really has to go through the regs in some detail, but typically in buildings of the size we see in downtown St. Helena, the second story will be exempt so long as the use is in the list of uses for which the exemption applies.
So I'm going to infer from what you just said, Chair Hardy, that you are comfortable with the, with the testimony of the building inspector. And if you are, I am. But is that a correct inference?
Well, I understand that the second story is generally exempt, but I note that what's in front of us, in effect, is an application for permitted uses, or at least that's how the uses are described, commercial and office. We don't really have much detail, and not all uses would be exempt.
So are you comfortable with...
And I'm fine with it. This simply means that uses that are not exempt will not be able to locate in the second story of this building.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, then I'm going to invite the applicant or the applicant's representatives to present the project, please.
Thank you. This is David Walker. I figured I would lead in with an introduction since many of you I have not met and you have not met me. So I want to again express my appreciation to everybody for taking the time to hear this project out. I recently moved up to St. Helena from Los Angeles, bought a home on Inglewood, fell in love with St. Helena, and quickly fell in love with the town itself. And my goal with acquiring the shed and trying to redevelop it is to bring something that's been sitting, more or less empty for God knows how long, back to life. And when I do projects, I do a lot of projects that are similar to this. My goal is always never to completely wipe the building and clean the slate, but to bring it back to its original luster. And with this particular building, you have to kind of suspend disbelief a little bit because it's been sitting in its kind of derelict state for some time. But everything that we've done with regard to our planning is to keep in the character of St. Helena, try to bring back a functioning building that will enhance the overall downtown aesthetic, not detract at all from it, but bring something positive to it. To that end, my main tenant for the building is going to be a local builder in town. I am, again, have relocated. It was exacerbated by the COVID virus, where I said I like being up here a heck of a lot more than in Los Angeles. Not a bad place to quarantine, I might add. I have the fortune where I can make this my home and work from here. And this was a good test run for me. So it accelerated my personal life choices by about 4 or 5 years. I'll also be doing another home up here when I have the opportunity to build that in St. Helena that will replace my existing home. So I'm all in when it comes to St. Helena. I love this town. We spend quite a bit of time walking the street, meeting people, getting to know people. So it's my intent to integrate both personally and with my building into the society and into town, and not cause conflict and not cause friction, full well knowing that it's going to be impossible to make everybody happy, especially when we're kind of dealing with tight spaces as we are here, trying to make an economically viable building while at the same time adhering to kind of the character that exists in St. Helena. Our goal always was and has been and will be to maintain the historical context and adhere to the guidelines, and to preserve the character of downtown. Were we to try to address the parking in the perfect sense, we would either have a building that was, some said, economically unviable, but tiny, or grotesque. It would have to be raised over stilted parking. The overall height would be 3 or 4 stories. In my opinion, that would do more of a detriment to the aesthetic of the town than trying to keep in line in the character of the footprint of the building. And in fact, I think we're shrinking the actual footprint ever so slightly. Part and parcel is the fact that we've had to contend with the PG&E pole that the guy wires run currently through the roof of a portion of the existing Adams building, to which we're going to make the building a little bit more narrow so that that's not the case. And so we've had to kind of contend with parking, trying to keep character, dealing with how do we deal with the side where along Money Way so that it's not so absolutely congested, full well knowing that when you are in the back of the building, it's challenging. It's challenging for everybody back there. And we're trying not to add to that in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, we're trying to lessen that impact. And, the tools that are at our disposal as were provided to us by the planning department provide for the ability to obtain a variance for parking, which is the most feasible route. If there was a way to not have to do that I did not have to pay the in lieu fee, that we could solve the parking in some other way that was reasonable or achievable, trust me, we would consider doing that. I personally don't enjoy writing checks. I'd rather be writing a check for the building but this is what is available to us, and it is a goal to try to satisfy as many people as we possibly can, and at the end of the day, have a building that is a functioning, vibrant building to replace one that is simply gathering rust. And I do again appreciate people's the passions that they may hold regarding the project, but knowing that you know, I'm coming in here, I'm making a big investment, but it is also my goal to make something that will withstand the test of time and make people proud of what St. Helena looks like. So I wanted to just at least have an opportunity to say that and to introduce myself. There's a few other people that obviously will be speaking on behalf of this project on my side. But again, I wanted to express my gratitude to everybody for hearing us out, and I hope you can understand the constraints that we've had to deal with and the challenges to come up with this particular plan.
This is Luke.
I have to mute myself. I was just saying, Mr. Walker, thank you, and please do precede anyone who will follow you speaking about the project.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think, Luke, is that going to be you speaking next?
Yes. I know it says Jenny Hoover. We're a team, so Jenny Hoover is the applicant, works with Wade Design Architects. I'm Luke Wade from that profession. I'm just going to focus on parking and accessibility because those are the questions that came up. I think we started from a place of modesty with this project. The idea was to make a contribution to St. Helena in a way that blends in. The conceit I used was that someone who had lived in St. Helena their whole life was driving down Adams, that it wouldn't be like something new, a spaceship landed. That what we would do here with David Walker would feel like it had kind of been there all along. Kind of his ethos of things getting better over time. It's a small lot, and there's a limit to what can be accomplished. The overlay of historic concern, design review, maintaining the character and fabric of the district runs counter in opposition to the parking overlay for a lot of this scale. Like David said, other than elevating a building on stilts with a full parking lot below, it is hard to get to a compliant parking scheme. This, of course, runs counter to the desire for street presence and the maintenance of the character of St. Helena. Now, questions about existing parking on Money Way and backing out into Money Way. Working with staff, the parking was discussed quite a bit. The parking that's on the site is not compliant in terms of back out space and everything else. There's been discussion, some of the letters in opposition talk about, well, there's 3 spots, we're losing spaces. I think it's an easy thing to say that if St. Helena was comfortable with the maintenance of that existing parking configuration, which the current design allows for, that would be beneficial in terms of the project and the tenancy and everything else. So if the backing out into the right of way is something that's allowable, that would be of interest. We would want to know if that relieves us of the need for an accessible walkway connecting to Adams, because it's kind of a catch-22. If we add parking, the first parking space needs to be accessible. So then you have an accessible parking space on an alley that has no accessible walkway, right? So in light of that and in discussions with staff, that's where we arrived where we are with, well, let's forego the parking completely. The second level ADA, John spoke to this a bit. John, you're correct. You're saying what I would illuminate, which is that there is a square footage limit for different uses where you don't have to have accessibility to that second floor. And given the uses that we're applying for, that's the case here. The ADA side entrance, we have the letter from the neighbor that allows for that access. Obviously, the applicant is aware, David's aware, that if access is blocked and that there, there's a contingency, an interior accessible connection would need to be undertaken at his expense. So that's something that we've already kind of mapped, so that we kind of have a contingency plan, if you will, in place. And if, I don't know if there's a condition of approval that allows for that to move forward. Just to sum up, it's a modestly scaled lot. It's hemmed in by existing conditions all around. You also spoke to the de facto access at the south side of the building, right? It's not really a public right of way, but many people park along and creates a flow. We were careful not to disrupt those sorts of situations that aren't quite code compliant or up to snuff, if you will, and are trying to do something that adds to the fabric of St. Helena. Thank you. Lily, do you want to say something briefly regarding the historic overlay and your report?
Yeah. So I imagine you've all seen my report, and as far as this the new construction goes, it does a really great job of being very compatible with the larger district, and it maintains some of those historic relationships. And like David said, it's not meant to kind of detract or draw attention to itself, but it kind of fits right in. So I think they did a really nice job of maintaining that continuity, and putting in something that will, enhance kind of the vibrancy of the downtown commercial district, without kind of taking away from anything. Sorry, my cat's over here having some issues. And then as far as parking goes, I think that it's being a historic commercial district, you run into issues with the area having developed prior to cars being much of a consideration. And so I think that, just as much as kind of the physical development is important, the overall feel and the vibrancy of a historic commercial district is important too. And I feel like, this project promotes that. And I think that's important to kind of consider when looking at the project and just kind of balancing those different factors. But from a historic standpoint, I feel like the applicants have done a really nice job. That's all I have.
Is there anyone else then, Mr. Walker, who will be speaking on your behalf? You need to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
I'm still new to this with Zoom. I think, Luke, is that all we have? Just the three of us. We're going to chat about it at this point.
Yes, unless Jenny has anything else to say. I mean, this may be kind of obvious, but a real win for us as applicants would be if there are concerns that they become conditions of approval and allow for us to work specifics out with staff who we've already had a great pre-application with and had a great back and forth with. So that would be our preferred, obviously our preferred outcome here. And if there's questions for us to help get to that end result, we'd welcome them.
Very good. Thank you. So this is a good time for me to ask then, do any of my fellow commissioners have questions for the applicant or the applicant's representative? Commissioner Hale.
Yeah, I just have a question on the loading zone. Are there, can you kind of expand on what the parameters are of the definition of that? Is that a loading zone for this building only? Is it a loading zone for adjacent properties? I mean, I understand kind of how it works now. Is very sort of quasi undefined. It's part pass through, part. But how is that been defined, or is it more defined now than it has been previously?
I can answer that. I'm Jenny Hoover, and I have been working with David and with staff to figure these sort of things out. And the idea with that loading zone is that it would be an area where tenants of the building could, tenants or delivery people for that building could drop off office supplies. I mean, if one of the tenants we're working, possible tenants we're working with is a general contractor, so they might need to, load their truck with equipment and take off. So it's just for use of the tenants as a temporary place to put their vehicle while they bring things in and out of the building. And the real goal with that was to leave that area alone as much as possible and let it kind of be what it has been for 100 years, without interfering with the access, kind of the ad hoc parking on other people's property that exists there now.
Okay. Is access through there defined in either this deed or the neighbor's deed who do pass through there?
Not that I'm aware of. I think everything that's going on back there is just older existing conditions that predate the requirement for any sort of easement, or just conditions that have been in existence for a very long time.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission for the applicant or the applicant's representatives? Yes, Commissioner Anderson.
You had mentioned the raised parking beneath the building. If that was discussed, why isn't it in the parking studies? Because that was honestly my first thought when I saw this and saw the parking issues. And I have a pretty good understanding of the parking issues in that area. 1224 and 1223 Adams have a small parking lot in the back, and there's always been a huge parking issue in that area. So I'm really actually concerned about the parking issue with this project.
You cut out a little bit. I'll start with, you were asking, I guess, about the ability to raise the building and add parking underneath. Again, our overriding concern was that the building then becomes, call it 3 or 4 stories high when we do that, effectively changing the skyline, if you would, of St. Helena. And I was, really hesitant to go down that path of putting the building on piers or pilings to achieve that, where we just did not find that to be feasible, whether it's financially or from an aesthetic standpoint. It didn't seem that we would be able to really, satisfy that requirement in any reasonable way. So we did not really pursue that any further than where we were going with it, which was to go down the route of trying to get, pay the in lieu fee.
I will also chime in and say that those sort of layouts also negatively impact both the loading zones that exist right now on Moneyway, the public loading zones, and or the public parking spots on Adams, and they require us to put down posts that would interfere with the access that neighbors are enjoying kind of through that back area as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Luke Wade. Just to expand on what Jenny just said, if you make a parking lot, a 9-car parking lot, on a lot of that scale, you're going to need an entrance point and an exit point for that layout to work. And that's what she means about, like, okay, now you're going to have cars coming in on Adams without any distance between that parking entrance and Moneyway, and then you're going to exit it onto Moneyway. and all the while wiping out what are currently, more like publicly benefiting parking spaces and loading zones to create a private right parking, so that we felt like we would run afoul of other concerns. And just generally felt overly ambitious for the scale of the lot.
Thank you. Are there any other commission questions for the applicant? If there are none, then I will. Oh, Commissioner Pont?
Yeah. My concern with the parking is not necessarily to generate 9 parking spots on the site. I recognize it's a small site. There are several similar sized sites that actually front Main Street. They have 2, sometimes 3 parking spaces. So I'm not, and the district, the overlay district, was set up specifically for this kind of condition. So I have no qualms with not wanting to put in 9 spots. I recognize how difficult that would be. I'm more interested in as many as we can reasonably get on the site in the spot you have labeled as a loading zone. 2 reasons for that. One, there's 3 spaces back there now. I would love to see another 3 spaces. 2, you've got a loading zone on a private lot. I'm afraid that'll just turn into a parking spot anyway, regardless of how you label it, unless you pursue it actively. So I would really love to see as many parking spaces that could reasonably be put on the site. So the question is, looking at your designs and considering now backing out on the money way, which is completely allowed, how many spaces can you reasonably get on the site that you got labeled loading zone?
Well, we can look
Go ahead,
at
Jenny.
I'm sorry. There were some parking studies that we submitted as part of our application, and they are maybe if the staff who is screen sharing.
I did see the drawings.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we were to back out onto Money Way, would the city be fine with losing those loading zones, the public loading zones that are there? Because that seems kind of like what would have to happen to make that work.
So Jenny, can you articulate for John and the other commissioners, what is the dimension between that last loading zone to the south, the back end of it, and the end of our property?
Yeah, I can do a little measurement.
Because those loading zones are more of a public benefit. It's a shared, it's the commons. Shared.
There's 13 feet. There's 13 feet
from the
available there.
End of the loading zone
to the back of our property line.
Yeah.
There we go.
As you can see, it's difficult. It's difficult if you'd say, okay, we'll allow backing out. We would have to squeeze through that gap, and it is possible. And when you talk about the 3 parking spaces that are there now, we're charged working with staff to make compliant parking, right? To make parking that actually meets the rules. What's there now doesn't meet the rules, but it so does most everything that you see on Money Way in terms of parking. Right?
Yes, almost none of it's compliant. Yes, I would agree.
We're in a catch-22 of like wanting to put forward an application that meets the current standards, all the while knowing that we're in a situation that reasonably that's not happening all around. Yeah. So that's truthfully the loading zone designation is, we arrived at that as well. It's not on paper really compliant to be much else.
Well, if you took that loading zone and planted it, you wouldn't need the variance. So, the loading zone is of use to your building, but it requires you to have a variance back landscape plan. I recognize that, in fact, I like the building. It's been sensitive to the area. It's design. It's not just a box on stilts with parking underneath. Great. Did you happen to explore moving or shortening the city loading zone to allow you access? Because all of your drawings that back out onto Money Way or say we can't do this according to this piece of code. Well, that piece of code is not applicable in this case.
Commissioner Pont, if Mr. Heacock has anything to add, I'd like to hear from him now, if I may.
Great.
So I was just going to clarify something. That is soon, if we were to require even one space back there, then we're going to need to make it ADA accessible, and we'll have to have the line of path travel, and so that it will change the nature of how that's used, and also how the building is accessed. That's my understanding. That's all.
I recognize there's no travel path from the back of the building to an ADA accessible entrance, except rolling down or walking down Money Way, which is not an ADA accessible route. That would mean sort of turning their building around and putting the ADA entrance, which is on the front, on the back. It would mean a redesign. However, we would get some parking spaces. I'm just wondering, because parking in that area is extremely difficult and times almost impossible. I would like to maximize what they have. And I recognize that under our code right now, all they need to do is write a check and we're done. But can we get something back there to relieve what is a really problem area?
Well, I think, Vice Chair Pont, that at this point, we're probably going to be more effective if we hold that question for our deliberations with the understanding that I will be happy to reopen the public hearing so that we can hear again from the applicant and anyone else who wishes to speak to those issues.
I'm agreeable to that, Chair Hardy.
Thank you. So this is a last call for commission questions of the applicant. And I see Commissioner Hale. You're still muted, Commissioner Hale.
Okay. The ADA access to the back unit is through the side alley. And is it correct that that side alley is kind of shared between, or the property line for that is in between there, or is that entirely on the neighbor's property?
It's entirely on the neighbor's property.
And do they have, is there ADA access at the front? Because I know right now there's a gate there.
We would improve that gate walkway so that it was fully compliant with an ADA access point.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So, Commissioner Pont.
You're on mute.
Yes, a point of clarification, if you would please. I'm looking at your drawing of your sketch of the building. It appears that the ADA access, as shown, only allows access to the rear part of the building. Is that correct?
That walkway provides the ADA access to the rear part of the building. The front part of the building will have an ADA accessible entrance right off of Adams because you can.
Okay. So the side entrance is only to supply the ADA allowed access and required access to the rear part of the building. And it gives you a clear path to do so.
That's correct.
Okay. Otherwise, you'd have to cut some kind of portal through the wall between the two halves of the building. Okay. Thank you.
If there are no other commissioner questions for the applicant, I'd like to invite members of the public to speak. And so I will ask Polzinski if there are any members of the public who've raised their hand or indicated a wish to speak.
Yes, we do have some public comment. I'll allow them to speak now.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Oh, she's on mute.
Okay? Hello?
Yes, go ahead. I can hear you.
Thank you very much. I'm a neighbor down Money Way there. My family has a building at 1336 Oak. And when my family built that building, we were required to put in the parking spaces because in lieu of parking, I guess, hadn't been invented then. So as it stands now, we have 15 parking spaces for 5 tenants. So the employees have a place to park, as do their customers. My concern is, since we're just down the road, that a new building, which is beautiful, and I welcome that building into the city, but the parking is a real issue for us, even though it's private parking for there, and you can put up as many signs as you want. You can't keep the public out. And Money Way is already a nightmare, along with Adams Street, Oak. And as a former elementary school teacher, it was a fight to the finish every morning to get a place to park on Adams. So building a building, as beautiful as that's going to be, will add more employees as well as customers. And that building has been empty for my entire life. So all of a sudden, we're going to have more people vying for all those parking spots on Adams. So my only request, and I would urge the commissioners to seek out, as Mr. Ponte said, as much parking as humanly possible there, because to have no parking isn't really fair to the rest of the community, because we're shoppers and we need to park. And in particular, you're right next door to the shipping company, which we use constantly, and it's a struggle to find a place to park and run your cases in and out. So I would just like to see if there's a way that Mr. Walker could look again and perhaps get more parking out of there. We have 6 parking spots on Money Way that are actually on Money Way, and you do back out of them. There hasn't been a complaint in 40 years. We have another building across Money Way that fronts Main Street and has 2 parking spots. They back into Money Way. I mean, people just figure out how to get in and out of those parking spots. Except for on Tuesday when the garbage guys come through to pick it up. That's kind of a tricky part. But I get the in lieu of parking, and that's great money for the city and all, but it sort of goes into a black hole because it's been collected for 30 plus years and we still don't have a parking lot with it. So I understand that $63,000 is a lot of money for the Walker family, and it will go into the city coffers, of course, but it's not enough to find a place to put more parking in town, and parking has been an issue forever. And so I think that would be the major objection to the way this building is designed. So I just really urge you all to figure out how to at least get the 3 that they've we have back there, because I saw, I looked at all 6 of the options, and not a fan of any of them, but one in particular, the option 3 took away 2 existing parking spots on Adams, and that would just make it impossible on that corner, because it's very congested, and school is going to start again one of these days, and so there will be teachers parking up Oak and Adams, and parents dropping kids off. It's a crazy corner. So as much parking as you could possibly get would be, and it really advantageous to this community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
You're welcome. Oh, could I say one more thing? I did submit a letter. I hope that.
I think we lost our connection to Ms. Smith.
Do you want me to bring her back up?
Yes, she should have a chance to finish what she was saying. Thank you.
Am I
okay,
up?
Ms. Smith, you can come. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, I wrote a letter, and so I'm hoping everybody got it and was able to read it. I'm not going to repeat what I said in the letter. I kind of already did a little bit. Sorry for that. But, it's really all about the parking. I have absolutely no objection to anything else. I think the design is beautiful. I just wish you could get a lot more parking in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kolzinski, do we have any other members of the public who have indicated a wish to speak?
It looks like we do not at this time. I do see that Mr. Trainer's hand is up.
Well, he's definitely a member of the public, so please.
Okay, here I am. And I just wanted to, first off, say that, it's my intent to sign a long-term lease to use the rear portion of this building as our offices for trainer builders. But I wanted to, in order to perhaps alleviate some of the concerns about parking, to discuss, how our business operates. We have currently 5 employees who work in the business, in the office, counting me. We're setting it up so that there might be space for a 6th. I tend to walk to work every day. I live 2.5 blocks away. It's good for my health to walk to work. 2 of our employees stay in the office all day long. And then the other 2 are project managers. They spend most of their time out in the field, so they're not actually using up parking spaces. Our clients visit us every now and then. I would say we probably may have perhaps 1 or 2 clients a week come visit, and 1 or 2 subcontractors come by to look at plans a week. So it's not like there is a tremendous amount of we're having a tremendous amount of demand on parking. Our current office on the corner of Adams and Railroad, we have 1 designated parking space for trainer builders, and that seems to work just fine. So that's all I wanted to say was that we're not doing a high volume of visitors coming in, people coming in. It's a very quiet office. All the work that we do is away from the office for the most part.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer.
You're welcome.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Mr. Dickerson, I see your hand. Ms. Kolzinski, would you please up? Looks like you can speak.
Yeah, I think I'm on the in list. I'm Joel Dickerson with Madrone Engineering, and civil engineer for this project. I may have missed my shot perhaps a few minutes ago, but I had a very quick question for Director of Public Works, Erica. I was glancing through the conditions of approval, and before we move to, hear the commissioners speak about those conditions, I just wanted to make sure we understood exactly what you were referring to. This would be Public Works condition number 47. And I'll just read out the part that we have a question about. It says, construct ADA compliant sidewalk along the entire project frontage and replace the adjacent driveway to Money Way. What does the adjacent driveway to Money Way mean?
Ms. Smithies, would you please address Mr. Dickerson's question?
So there's the driveway. Sorry, I got background noise behind me, but we do have a driveway that's right adjacent to the project site that you're already going to be replacing the sidewalk, which you have included in your plans. But originally in a comment letter during design review, we requested that driveway that goes to Money Way to be replaced as well, because you are accessing that and it's crumbling compared also as well as the sidewalk. So we were trying to condition the project to include that driveway with this project.
Okay, so the driveway entrance, not necessarily like the length of Money Way, just the driveway entrance.
Just the entrance, yes. No, not we just microsurfaced Money Way. So no.
Thank you very much. That was my question. Thank you.
Any other members of the public who wish to speak? Ms. Kolzewski?
I don't see anyone at this time.
Very good. Then I will close the public hearing. I may reopen it later or not, but it's time to bring it back to the commission and talk some more. It sounds like we'll be talking a bit about parking. Who would like to go first? Do I see a hand? No volunteers? I'll call on someone. Commissioner Anderson. Commissioner Anderson, please.
The parking issue does really concern me. I have a lot of experience with parking in that area. With 1224 Adams Street, it has a small parking lot in the back, and it was still a huge ordeal for employees and customers to park there. So adding a business, even though the current, tenant doesn't need that many spaces, that's not to say that the next one won't, that their activity won't be any different. And we're not approving the tenant, we're approving the building, which, hopefully will be there for a lot longer. And I really think that it needs parking. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Vice Chair Pont, did you have something?
Yeah, I do. 3 concerns. First and foremost is the parking. I would, like I said, certainly love to see as much as we can get on that site. I recognize that there's no reasonable way to get 9 spots. And without completely putting a building up that's out of scope and scale for the area. I like the building. I like the design. It fits right in. But we do need more parking. Second thing is the ADA access, particularly that on the west side that goes down a walkway not controlled by the applicant. I could see where that would be an impossible problem to solve if the next door neighbor decides to close that walkway. You'd have to break through the wall in between the 2 buildings. Unless it's leased by the same individual, all of a sudden you got lease problems. So I don't know if that's a good solution. I'd be curious to know what the difficulty is in actually making that rear entrance ADA eligible. Third thing is, and this is longer term, the voluntary access way from Money to Oak. Frankly, without cleaning this up, or at least starting to clean this up, I think this is the kind of problem that eventually keeps lawyers employed. I would love to find a way to proceed towards cleaning that up. So either A, it's an access, or B, it's not. It should be really clear to everybody involved, to the nearby property owners, to the existing property owner, what's allowed, what's not, what that area can be used for. This worked well up to now, but frankly, that's absolutely no guarantee. And I would hope the commission would consider an approach that would at least clean this piece up. And eventually we could get the next piece and the next piece and the next piece. And eventually it's all clear, one way or the other, what that is, how it functions, and who controls it. Thank you.
I mean, the way I look at this, it's kind of a balancing act here between seeking a massing solution and a character solution that fits best in this location, and then measures puts an appropriate weight, I guess, to the parking concern, which, I think obviously people have. Personally, I hate to see parking kind of rule the day. I think it's ruled the day way too long in this town, in this society. I'd much rather see us encouraging pedestrian access, which we give lip service to, but building more parking spaces doesn't do that. I think we have to encourage people to walk, whether they're customers or business people. The more pleasant we make this this solution, I think it does. I agree with the parking overlay district goals of I think maintaining the character, the authenticity of this downtown is not improved by raising up on stilts and conjuring a solution that's one floor up. I don't think you can. I think you have to make a choice at some point that we would rather see an in-scale, in-spirit solution and address and embrace pedestrian connectivity in a way that we haven't done very effectively. I'm a fan of that existing building. I always have been. I embrace the rust of it, and I appreciate the difficulty of keeping it. I understand. I've witnessed people backing out of Vasconi's into that building. And knocking, I understand the posts are knocked off. It's, and I fully understand what it would take to sort of preserve that building would be in name only. It's not a really feasible thing. I appreciate that they tried to conjure a reasonable facsimile to what is there, and as much as address the scale of what's there, and I think they've done that. I tend to agree on the back being a little loosey-goosey is a bit problematic to me. I would rather see it defined. As we talk about Money Way being more pedestrian, which I understand is a whole nother can of worms for people. But having that additional access shot through to Oak, and having it somehow solidified, I think is a step in that direction. I would, encourage somehow that language or that situation be clarified. But otherwise, I appreciate the scale of it. I think it's a balanced, sensitive approach. And I don't personally believe we have a parking issue. I think we have a parking narrative issue in this town. But I think we have to break that narrative somehow and start building a new narrative that does encourage people to leave their cars at home and walk to work and make trips to where they can without a car. And I don't think we accomplish that by letting by paving more and letting parking lots rule the solution. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Hale. Commissioner Manette, please.
Yeah, I tend to be in agreement with Commissioner Hale on this. First of all, there have been parking problems at that place and in Money Way and in St. Helena forever ad nauseum, and it's not new. And I don't think that 9 parking places are going to solve the issue. I don't think that this applicant should be required to solve the issue or work towards its solution any more than many of the other people who use Money Way have been, either, in the past or in the recent past. Let's see. So that, in a way, that's unfair. Let's see. I don't like pandering to cars either. Let's see. Oh yes, and other people have not been asked to do such draconian things as raising the building. I mean, draconian for the applicant, but also for the city. I hate to see accommodating more and more cars, but I don't think enough people are going to be riding bikes and walking. I mean, maybe local people, yes, but to really alleviate the parking problem, it is huge and it goes beyond this application. My sense is perhaps we can, I really like this project and I think it's fine the way it is. I have no problem with any of it. I don't think we can clean up Money Way or clean up any of these. I don't think we should force this applicant or, not move forward with this application based on stuff that goes way beyond his particular participation in the town and in that particular location. Perhaps we can use the in lieu payments that he's making and really make a concerted effort in the town to establish a parking lot in St. Helena, in one of the places, in the different areas that we've talked about, which would encourage tourists to walk if there were a parking place at the south end of town. And it would alleviate in general the parking issue because it's a general issue. It's not just Money Lane. It's not just this project. So I'm thinking we have talked about it, but I'm not sure what we would need to do to take that in lieu payment, to start funneling other funds as necessary, apply for grants if necessary, but to really establish a parking area that would accommodate enough cars to maybe alleviate the parking congestion a little bit and encourage walking for people who park there. It could even be metered, so it would make the city some money. But anyway, I'm fine with this project the way it is. I think it's a great project. I think it's going to improve everything, and I'm hoping we don't hold it up because we're frustrated and upset about the parking issue in general, because I don't think this, okay. So I think I've said what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a number of things to say. I may hopefully knit some of the comments we've already heard together in certain ways. I'm reminded that back in the early 90s, when the 93 general plan was in process, downtown parking was a concern, and the city council asked the traffic consultant who was working on the general plan EIR to do a kind of separate side report on parking. And he did, and he came back to the city council and reported that he really wasn't sure why people thought there was a problem. He came on the busiest days at the busiest times and could always find a parking place within 1 or 2 blocks of Main Street. So certainly at that time, there was some reason to think that the concerns about parking were, to some significant extent, really defined by expectations as much as by the availability of parking. Or to put it differently, there seemed to be a sentiment that if you couldn't park very close to your intended destination, maybe just a few storefronts away, that there was a problem. I'm not easily persuaded that conditions are the same today on Main Street as they were 30 years ago. I think the ever-increasing volume of traffic that Highway 29 carries does have an effect on how people coming to town use Main Street. I think it is much more intimidating to parallel park on Main Street than it used to be. Not that it was easy 30 years ago, but the more that volume of traffic builds, the more congested Main Street itself is. And so I think there are reasons to be concerned about parking. I have an issue with our in lieu fee. This is not anything that is the responsibility of the applicant, but that in lieu fee was $7,000 30 years ago. There were some who thought it was inadequate then. I'm certain that in terms of the real cost of creating parking, it's woefully inadequate today. In terms of our ability to create a space for $7,000, I just don't think that's even close. And I, in an exchange earlier with staff, I'm informed that the city's plan is still based on negotiating with PG&E to establish a parking lot on the PG&E property off of Mitchell, where in days gone by the substation was located. This is one of these things I've got to say when I consider the 25 plus years that I'm personally aware of that this has been a subject of discussion. It's difficult to have much confidence that that project is going anywhere soon. So I think, there are some real big picture problems with the policies and premises of the whole downtown parking program that are embedded in places into the development standards and the ordinance in ways that we've been talking about tonight. We can't solve those problems tonight, but I also want to say, in my experience in the past, and and I think this is generally true for the properties where the in lieu parking fee comes up. For the most part, the fee comes up when there's a change in use from one retail use to another in a Main Street space. And the prior use maybe was established before the parking requirements were adopted, and for whatever reason, the new business has to pay an in lieu fee, etc. Those are situations where we're not necessarily presented with any change in parking demand as a result of the new business. It's just a kind of opportunity for the city to catch up in terms of how the policy is intended to generate fees that can be used to develop parking for the benefit of the whole downtown. It looks a little bit different to me here when we apply it to a space that functionally, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't been anything more than storage for Vasconis in the last 30 years. It has not been an actively used space. So I think there's some real basis for the perception of neighboring property owners that here the project will generate demand that isn't already present. All of that has me, I think, aligned with Vice Chair Ponce's suggestion that what we really want here is as much functional parking at the rear of the building where the loading area is proposed as we can get. I don't disagree with that at all, but I don't think we can ignore the ADA-related consequences of requiring the plan to show parking there. I'm not sure what the path out of that conundrum is, if there is one. I'm open to ideas on that. It may be that, as a practical matter, we don't have a clear path to get any more parking back there than that will occur in spite of the designation as a loading area. I'm not sure. I'll shift at this moment to the next subject on my mind, which is the ADA entrance on the side of the building that requires access across the neighboring property. I'm really uncomfortable as a sort of categorical matter with allowing project approval based on use of another property where that use is purely permissive. That just doesn't make sense to me as a general practice. I would be much happier if the easement were in fact required. If we're going to move forward to approve this application without requiring an easement, then at a minimum, I think we should have a real and enforceable plan B, or we're in effect taking the position that if for any reason the permission to use the path of travel that makes that ADA access functional is withdrawn, then the property owner and business owners are just on their own in terms of whatever consequences the failure to provide or meet the requirements of ADA we have right now a building department that takes ADA requirements seriously. I think at the end of the day, that's a good thing for everybody. The professional ADA plaintiffs are more than a nuisance. They can have real adverse impacts on businesses and property owners who are out of compliance. So, I support the building official's approach. He's not, in my experience, inflexible, but he is diligent. So there's a question for me, really, which is, what is a plan B and how well does it work? Because otherwise, as I say, I think we're just opening the door to a future in which the building is out of compliance and we as a city don't have anything we can do about it. That's pretty much my contribution to the discussion for the moment. I'm eager to hear from my fellow commissioners, and at some point I think I'll have questions for the applicant, but not just yet. Anyone else, please? Any commissioner thoughts? Have I helped? Not at all. That's possible. I recognize that. Commissioner Pont.
Well, I think you've helped. In the meantime, I still don't believe that this project should be able to supply 9. I mean, we're back to how many can you get? The ADA access was and remains worrisome. And I'd be curious to ask the applicant if that rear entrance could be made ADA accessible without too much trouble. And then ask staff if there was ADA access to the rear half of the building and there was an ADA parking space there, what implications does that have for the ADA compliance of the front half of the building, being that there's not a good way to get from the back of the building to the front of the building down Money Way. And unlike apparently nearly everybody else, I still remain concerned about the voluntary access way behind the building. I could just see where there'd be one argumentative, angry property owner or even a lessor along that route, and all of a sudden it becomes a real mess for everybody in the area.
Hey, John, not meaning to interrupt, but regarding that issue, I believe that this afternoon, Erica found the recorded document. Sorry, we've been furiously texting, that I think we are prepared to share. Maybe Erica will chime in here. Here she is.
Hi. Yeah, no. So I remember this coming up about early, mid-2017, someone asking to put up one-way signs because there are people, including the past public parks and recreation director, that used to park on the alley, limiting access for anyone that might have been blocked in by a loading zone on Money Way, because trucks do stop and unload in the middle of Money Way and block tenants in behind those buildings. So I was provided this recorded notice of consent to use of the land. It's for public or any person to make use of the alley, but the property owner does provide this caveat that it's subject to their control. But it still may not make you uneasy or make you uneasy about the access back there, but for all intents and purposes, to me, this is granted access. I think it'd be difficult for them to revoke it, even if they have it here recorded. But I'll let you. I know, John, you have a lot of background on here, but I did locate this document.
There should be more than one parcel on that route, right? There's the parcel in question. There's this parcel. There's the city parcel. Is how many parcels are there along that piece?
I believe there's 3, 4, 5, including the one that it's like a flag lot. I don't know if it's on the next page. It's only a flag lot. The parcel that owns the alley.
Okay.
And then you have the 3 parcels on Adams, and then 1350 fronts Oak. So you have the 3 along Adams that have access back there.
Okay, so it really is a flag lot then, kind of. So 1341 has given permission for everybody to use it?
Per that document, yes.
No,
Okay.
that's not how I read
Okay.
it. That's more, if you use it, we're going to say it's by permission so that we can deny permission when we wish to. And I think that's the clearest way to understand it. It's a recording that's intended to put the property owner in a position where they can legally deny access to anyone, including members of the public. The statute of limitations for a contrary action have not yet expired, but they will next year. That's a 5-year statute of limitations. With a long history of use, especially public use, there's at least potentially an argument of for an implied dedication to public use. It's kind of the equivalent of prescriptive easement in favor of the public. Such things can occur, but it's not, generally speaking, in the city's interest to be really aggressive in pursuing things like that in an area where they're congested or contested, I meant to say. I agree with you, Vice Chair Pont. The whole setup there, where we have a series of properties relying on access in order to provide parking that property owners seem to be telling us is in fact really important. It's a concern to me that the city doesn't have any clear established way to protect that access for the benefit not simply of the property owners, but for the public more generally. And certainly we could impose some requirement related to that concern on this applicant in the hope that if we take the opportunities one by one, it will all fall into place. But I'm not sure what that means. Well, it doesn't mean anything with respect to the flag lot. We have no ability to impose any conditions here that affect the flag lot at all. So that may really be, as I think about it, a dead end.
So to speak.
So to speak. And the opportunity, if it were to arise, would have to be in connection with development of the flag lot. And that would be perhaps the only way in which that could get done. What I'm looking for here is an approach to this project that doesn't lay a foundation for headaches in the future. In that regard, I'm thinking in particular, again, of the ADA subject, that provides as much functional parking as possible. And then, and we have some real conundrums there, as I say. If we're designating parking spaces, then the related ADA requirements loom very large. If we're not designating them as parking spaces, I don't know how we really require them, because if we require them besides designating them, it affects the in-loop parking calculation. I can't make any sense out of charging an in-lieu fee for a space that we're requiring and the applicant's providing, which is why then it has to be very clear. I also would like to note that, just for reference, and I think this is for our planning staff's benefit, I note that the parking requirement as described in the staff report is one space for every 300 square feet, or maybe this is additive in some sense, a minimum of 2 spaces for each business. So we have identified by square footage a 9 parking space requirement. I don't think there's any inconsistency here with the plan, but that does seem to me to mean that there can't be more than 4 tenants in the building, absent additional parking requirements. And if I'm right about that, then it should be so stated in the conditions of approval, especially given that the use permit is all about parking. So now I think there really are some technical questions that we need to walk through as best we can. And I'm going to reopen the public hearing and at the same time hope that when the question is really best answered by staff, that staff will be assertive and raise a hand, as I'm not sure how to parse it all out on my own. But I really do want to understand what the consequence of designating spaces at the rear as parking spaces is for ADA requirements. And I do understand generally that means that one of them has to be designated an ADA space, and then that there has to be an ADA compliant path of travel from the space to an ADA compliant entrance into the building. I'm assuming, without knowing, that this has been a subject at least of some discussion between staff and the applicant in the past. So perhaps, Mr. Heacock, you can explain to us what the problems are with going that route and putting parking spaces in the back from an ADA perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think the architect might have a better explanation, but I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. So as soon as we require any on-site parking, it triggers ADA compliance. So therefore, we would need to require an ADA spot behind the building where that parking is. They would then need to have ADA compliant access to the whole building from that spot. And so the way the building is configured now, it wouldn't work for that. So I don't know, Jenny, if you want to chime in on that at all, or
this is Luke Wade. I'll jump in, and Lester Hardy really got me thinking. You're very good at articulating the catch-22 as we see it. Just so there's clarity for everyone involved here. If you look at the existing condition of the amount of space given over to parking currently behind the building, this proposal is only 1 foot less space. In other words, the building sits only 1 foot less than what's there now, right? But as we've said, that parking is not compliant, separate from even the ADA concern. If we put an ADA spot in the back, we already have a 4-foot walkway shown in front of that back entrance to the building. What we would also need is a sidewalk that runs along Money Way, right? And in fact, that runs along Money Way and connects to the sidewalk at Adams. In fact, there's a 4-foot setback that the property has, so there's a space for it. Unfortunately, there's PG&E power pole right smack dab in the middle of it, as well as the loading zone. The current loading zone is striped into the property. So both of those would have to be dealt with to be able to swing that sidewalk through. The other thing I will say about the parking is that if the concern, and I think it is, if the concern is truly a rational concern, a realistic concern of number of cars and relieving stress on public parking, then creating a situation where the parking has an ADA spot that gets infrequent use, what we'll end up with is one ADA spot and 1 or 2 additional spots. However, the loading zone area, as you see there, from a kind of pragmatic point of view, you could stack 4 cars into that space, right? Access off of Money Way, which is, when you're talking about the concern of how many cars can we fit back there, you have a better outcome, right, for the public relative to the number of spots you're fitting on the lot. There's still the question of the existing loading zone, or I'm sorry, the existing on the side of the building on Money Way, that striped space, that loading zone, ideally it would shift to the north by some degree to allow for pull-in parking.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And that raises for me another question for staff. Thinking perhaps this is for Ms. Smithies, but Mr. Heacock, if you know the answer, don't hesitate to chime in. I have no idea how that Money Lane loading area that actually includes a portion of this applicant's property, how that was created, if in fact the applicant has any obligation to maintain it. It's, I don't know what its status is, and along with that, can it be moved? Who's responsible for answering those questions or making those decisions? Anyone who raises a hand has got the floor, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, there's Erica. I was just about ready to chime in, but I'll let.
I would need, if we were talking about loading zones on Money Way, I would have to look at past resolutions to see, because typically only council has authority to create, the colored parking zones, and or as far as parking or no parking. I'd have to look at past actions on how that was created, but if it's on Money Way, it's a public facility. So,
well, didn't I just hear the applicant's architect state that loading area intrudes onto the applicant's property?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yeah, yes, it broaches into that 4-foot setback.
Yeah.
That's along Money Way, by about a foot or so.
By about a foot. Okay, thank you. So, that's another question. I think it's actually an important one, Ms. Smithies. I know there's just an endless amount of, an endless number of artifacts of the old days when no one was too concerned about getting things just right with respect to property lines and this or that. But if the loading zone in question was striped pursuant to the city's authority to designate parking areas in or on public rights of way, such as Money Way, and there's a portion of that one that, for whatever reason, got painted on to private property, then I don't know, that belongs on somebody's list of things to fix. It doesn't sound to me like opening up that 4-foot setback for an ADA compliant path of travel is really a solution. And honestly, I'm inclined to think that keeping it as proposed, having the loading area designated as shown on the applicant's plans, and then allowing for stacking of cars in the manner that occurs all up and down Money Lane, because there's no better way for business owners to use what limited space they have. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the kind of wink, wink, nod, nod way in which that really plays out, but I'm not sure we have a better option. I'm thinking we probably do not. And really my larger concerns are about the failure of the city to maintain the in lieu fees at a realistic rate. I mean, the failure to pay any attention to it at all. And I'm also concerned about the quest to establish a parking lot on PG&E's property. I'm concerned that has some potential to be yet another kind of Groundhog Day experience for the city. But again, those are not things that that this application, or in this matter, this commission can solve. So let's go then, if we can, to the subject of what happens if the applicant loses permission for access to the ADA compliant access on, I think that's the west side of the structure, if I've got this right.
I'd love to speak to that concern, if I may.
Please do.
I think the path forward that I can see, there may be many, but would be a condition of approval that asks for an exhibit that demonstrates graphically how a accessible pathway would be established otherwise on the property in the event that contingency occurs.
Thank you. That's more or less what I expected. So far, so good. I think that's as far as I can get myself. I'm starting to be exhausted by the subject of parking, I will freely confess. So, what do my fellow I said earlier that I would open the public hearing, and I meant that. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this subject? Ms. Kozicki, do you see any members of the public wishing to speak?
I do not.
Thank you. Then I will close the public hearing. Couldn't resist the wrap, sorry. Are we even close to being ready to construct a motion here? I'm hoping not to have to do that myself. Generally, the chair gets to avoid that. Vice Chair Pont.
Well, I want to preface this with some other verbiage, if you would. It really does look like we cannot do anything about the access on the through from Money to Oak until 1341 comes up and tries to do something. So that's out. The ADA access to the entire building, I remain concerned about, but a condition of approval that requires an addition of a sheet that comes up with Plan B. It's probably the best we can do, other than requiring it be a single building. But that would be difficult, I believe, on the owner. On the parking, it looks like ADA is going to preclude us from doing much. But I do have one more question on that. If that spot in front of the building is marked as an ADA spot, and given our average age in town, there's got to be a lot of placards around. Would that comply or not? I don't know. But it does sound, if we do approve it as designed now, I too hate the wink, wink, nod, nod, because everybody knows that loading zone will just fill up with whatever they can put in it, and they'll be parked all day, every day in that location. But if that's what we can get, that's what we can get. So, unless somebody else has a motion, I would move that we find the project exempt from CEQA, approve the demolition permit, agree to approve the design review, issue the variance for the planting, and make the findings for them to pay into the parking in lieu fee, and approve the use permit with the addition to the resolution of a condition for a Plan B shown in case we lose the ADA access on the west side of the building. I think that's the lot, isn't it?
Second.
Reluctantly.
Buster, you're muted.
That doesn't work very well, does it? Okay, much better. I don't know, maybe y'all thought it was better if you couldn't hear me, but anyway, would you consider, Vice Chair Pont, amending the motion simply to make it clear that in the event that access to the proposed ADA compliant entrance is on the north side is, or that's west side rather, is lost, that the applicant shall construct a replacement access?
How about shall bring his building into compliance with the ADA forthwith?
That works for me. And in addition to the requirement that that a fallback plan or Plan be acceptable to staff.
I will accept that amendment.
Thank you.
As the person who seconded also accepts it. I should not say that. That's your place, Chair.
Yes.
Okay. I believe that was approval by the second. Is there any further discussion?
Welcome to St. Helena, Mr. Walker.
Seeing no hands raised, I'll ask Ms. Gamero to take the roll, please.
Vice Chair Pont, I'm sorry, we missed that.
Yes.
John. Commissioner Hale,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
and Chair Hardy.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Walker, for your patience. This was, I'm sure, a tedious discussion of what is a very important subject and part of the city's ongoing effort to keep a downtown that was laid out and constructed largely in the late 19th and early 20th centuries viable in the 21st. You're still muted.
I'm still getting used to this. I appreciate everybody's time and thoughtfulness. It's interesting to see how you dissect it and bring it back together, and it's a good thought process. I really do appreciate that, and I'm all in favor of bringing back horses. Let's get rid of cars. Let's go to horses.
That's a thought that's dear to my heart. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
I appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you. So now if I can just find the right page, I'll know where I am on the agenda. There we are. It's a short one that takes care of public hearings, brings us to scheduled matters of which there are none. And now is the time for department reports. Planning Director DeRosa.
Thank you. Good evening. Just a few updates. I want to thank Senior Planner Heacock for applying to HCD for our local, our LEAP grant, which basically will allow the city to receive funding for our housing element update, which we hope to get a consultant on board later this year. And we are tasked with doing our baseline work as early as possible. So we really look forward to helping get that funding, which will make the consultant possible. The next is we will not be having a planning commission meeting. And our regularly scheduled meeting would have been August 4th. We don't have any items. But as I think I mentioned in the past, we do have an August 13th special meeting of the Planning Commission to talk about the zoning code update and the recommendations memo that Lisa Weiss Consulting has prepared. And we, due to some of the COVID concerns, we won't be doing any public in-person outreach prior to that, but we will be looking to host possibly a virtual office hour. So I'll get back to you on what the dates of those are leading up to August 13th. But there will be a, so the time of the special meeting on the 13th is 6 o'clock. And prior to that, we will have a virtual open house at 4:30. And there's a draft flyer with all kinds of great information I have from Lisa Weiss Consulting that will probably come out in the next week that you'll be seeing. And also we've refreshed the webpage for the zoning code update. And so we will be starting to upload a lot of information in advance of the meeting that people can find about that. So there's more to come on that, but I just wanted to alert you that we won't have a meeting on the 4th, but I will see you all on the 13th.
And will members of the Planning Commission get written materials about the zoning update?
Yeah, there'll be a staff report published for that with a short staff analysis and the recommendations memo attached.
All right, thank you.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any other reports from anyone? I see none, which is fine. The agenda forecast is by link, but I do want to remind everyone, since I finally started paying attention to this, that this is also the point in a meeting where we on the commission have an opportunity to request items be placed on future agendas for our discussion. So tossing that out there. I'm not seeing the phones light up, so I'm pretty sure this meeting is ready to adjourn. Thank you all. Good to see you in Zoom land.
Thank you, everyone.
Meeting's adjourned, and good night.
Mine.